Have you ever noticed that sometimes silence cuts deeper than any word ever could? Not the silence of peace, but the silence that comes after the storm, after the shouting, after the tears, after they waited for you to explain, to cry, to beg, and instead, all they got was silence. They were ready for your anger. They were ready for your tears. They were sure you would chase. But what they never expected was nothing. And it's that nothing that unsettles them most. That empty space. That quiet. Because silence is a mirror. A mirror that forces them to face themselves and everything they've been trying to avoid. See, silence isn't a game. It isn't revenge. It isn't cold indifference. At its deepest level, silence is the most powerful decision you can make. The decision to stop feeding what drains you. The decision to stop giving where nothing comes back. Maybe you've felt this before. Maybe you've been in a relationship, love, friendship, even work, where you kept having to prove your worth. You argued, you explained, you cried, you apologized, you gave everything just to hold on. And yet the more you gave, the more it drained you. Until one day, you stopped. You chose silence. Not because you stopped caring, but because you realized silence was the strongest protection for your soul. People think silence is weakness. That silence means giving up. But the truth is the opposite. Silence is strength. Silence is the sign of a soul mature enough to know not every battle is worth fighting. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, once said, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings." And it's true. To choose silence, you have to go through enough pain, enough struggle to finally understand sometimes the best answer is no answer at all. Think about it. How many times have you been dragged into endless arguments? Talking and talking, explaining and explaining, but the other person never really listened. How many times did you fight to prove yourself only to be met with cold silence from them? So what happens when this time you choose silence instead? No long message, no tears, no explanation, just silence. At first it unsettles them because they don't know how to fight without an opponent. They don't know what to do when the script they rehearsed is ripped out of their hands. And so confusion sets in. Silence makes them wonder, what changed? Why don't they need me anymore? Why aren't they trying? And out of that confusion comes fear. The fear that maybe you're truly done. That maybe you've already let go. And that's when the real power of silence reveals itself. Because silence doesn't hurt you, it heals you. But to them, silence is the mirror that shows everything they did wrong. Silence isn't the ending. It's the beginning. It's the declaration that says, I don't need to prove my worth anymore. I don't need to fight for something unworthy. I choose peace. Remember, this silence is never empty. It's full of power. It's full of growth. It's the first step out of the cycle of pain, into a life where your value no longer depends on someone else's recognition. So the next time you feel the urge to argue, to explain, to beg, stop. Choose silence. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than every word combined. 1. Silence as power. Have you ever noticed? Sometimes silence is stronger than 1,000 explanations. Words can be twisted. They can be argued with. They can be bent into whatever shape the other person wants to hear. But silence. Silence can't be touched. It can't be controlled. It can't be denied. That is the power of silence. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through many sufferings." And Seneca believed the highest form of self-control is the ability to stay quiet when every part of you is screaming to respond. Which means this choosing silence isn't easy. It takes scars. It takes maturity. It takes the strength of someone who no longer needs to prove their worth. Picture this. Someone insults you. Every part of you wants to strike back, to prove you're right, to prove you're strong. But what happens if you stay silent? They lose their opponent. Their script collapses. And suddenly the silence forces them to face themselves. At first they think it's a trick. Oh, they'll text back. They're just playing games. But days pass, weeks pass, no message comes. And that confidence, it turns into doubt. That doubt turns into fear. What if they've actually let go? What if they don't need me anymore? Here's the paradox. You're not doing anything. You're just silent. Yet that silence throws them into a spiral, questioning, doubting, tormenting themselves. I remember a friend who spent months writing long paragraphs trying to convince someone who never valued him. He explained. He justified. He pleaded. Nothing changed. The turning point came not when he wrote his deepest words, but when he wrote nothing, just silence. And suddenly, she panicked. Why aren't you saying anything? Why no reply? That's when he realized silence speaks louder than every word he'd ever wasted. Here's the key. Silence cuts the rope that ties your self-worth to someone else's approval. Maybe you've been waiting for their response, waiting for their validation, waiting for their permission to feel enough. But the moment you choose silence, you declare, I don't need that anymore. And the strangest thing, when you cut that rope, you don't lose power. You gain it back. The power to no longer be ruled by their emotions. The power to stand steady in your own peace. So let me ask you, how many times have you argued, begged, written pages of messages just for a reply that never changed anything? And how much energy, how much peace did you lose in the process? Now imagine if you had chosen silence from the start. How much calmer would you be? How much stronger? That is the strength of silence. It isn't weakness. It isn't surrender. It's the declaration that you're done playing a game that only drains you. Remember this. Words can be dismissed. Silence cannot. Words can be forgotten. Silence lingers. And in that silence, you don't just free yourself. You reveal the truth who was really dependent all along. 2. The stages of their collapse. Do you know what happens inside someone's mind? When you choose silence, they don't break right away. They don't instantly realize you've changed. Instead, they go down step by step, collapsing like a castle built on illusions, falling brick by brick. Stage 1. Relief. They tell themselves, it's just temporary. They'll be back. They feel confident. They think your silence is just a pause in the argument. Any day now you'll text, you'll call, you'll apologize. In their mind, they're still in control. But then, Stage 2. Curiosity. Time passes. No text, no call, nothing. They start scrolling at midnight, checking your profile, looking for signs, a sad post, a breakup song, a blurry picture, anything to prove you're still hurting. But all they find is silence. No cracks, no signal, just emptiness. And that emptiness eats at them. Stage 3. Frustration. Now they act out. They post pictures, write cryptic captions like your old photos, all to provoke a reaction. They want to drag you back into the game, but you stay silent. You don't bite. You don't play. And that's when they start to feel it. They're losing control. Stage 4. Fear. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lingers. They begin to wonder, what if this time they're really gone? What if they're not broken, but healed? What if someone else is standing where I used to be? Their imagination runs wild, painting pictures worse than reality. They see you smiling. They see you moving on. They see you living without them. And the images their own mind creates hurt more than anything you could ever say. And finally, Stage 5. Regret. This is the heaviest stage. Memories come flooding back, the times you forgave, the nights you cried alone, the moments you fought to keep what they kept breaking. They remember it all, and now it doesn't comfort them. It cuts them, because they know they wasted every chance. And the cruelest truth, they don't get to hear your voice anymore. You chose silence. Epictetus once said, "If you want to be strong, learn to enjoy being misunderstood." Your silence will always be misunderstood. They'll think you're angry. They'll think you're playing games. They'll think you're weak. But the truth, you're stronger than ever. You're choosing peace over chaos. So why does silence break them stage by stage? Because silence shatters the illusion of their ego. In their mind, you were the one who needed them. You were the one who always came back. But silence proves the opposite. It shows them the truth, the power was never theirs. And when that illusion collapses, regret becomes permanent. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to argue, to beg, remember this. You don't have to do anything. Silence will do it for you. It will carry them through every stage, from relief to curiosity to frustration to fear and finally to regret. And through it all, you lose nothing. You only grow stronger, more steady, more free. 3. Silence rewrites their story of you. You know what silence does? It doesn't just confuse them. It does something deeper. It rewrites the entire story they told themselves about you. In their mind, you were the one who always stayed, the one who always forgave, the one who always came back no matter what they did. To them, they were the prize, and you, just the one chasing. But then came your silence. No texts, no calls, no long explanations. And in that empty space, the truth began to surface. You are not who they thought you were. Silence is like invisible scissors. It cuts the rope that tied you to their illusion. It flips the power dynamic. It forces them to ask, maybe I'm not as important as I believed. Maybe they never really needed me. And just like that, their story starts to crumble. I remember a friend's story. He was in a relationship full of arguments. Every fight ended with him writing pages of texts, pleading his case, proving his love. Until one day, he wrote nothing. He walked away in silence. And that silence, it was the loudest answer of all. She panicked. She texted. She called. Why aren't you saying anything? But the silence had already spoken. It said, I'm no longer here. This is the difference. Silence isn't punishment. It isn't revenge. Silence is simply the truth, revealed the truth that your absence is permanent. And truth cuts deeper than any weapon. Do you see the paradox? They were ready for a fight. You gave them no weapons. They were ready for an argument. You gave them nothing to argue with. And that's when the ground slips away. They're left alone, staring into the empty space where you once stood, realizing they lost you. Seneca once said, "The greatest revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's exactly what silence creates. You're not plotting revenge. You're not playing games. You're simply different now. You've stepped out of the old role and into a new chapter 1 where you no longer need to prove, no longer need to beg, no longer need their approval. Picture this. They reach out hoping for the old you, the one who cried, the one who explained, the one who begged. But that person is gone. What they find instead is silence. And that silence is the declaration you've grown. You've changed. You've moved on. That is real power. Not shouting, "I've let you go," but being silent and letting them realize you're already gone. So remember, this silence isn't just a reaction. It's a reset. It breaks their illusion. It rewrites the story they told themselves. And when that illusion shatters, regret is the only thing left. Silence isn't a small ending. It's the beginning of a new perception, the perception that you were never weak, never desperate, but the one who always held the greatest power of all, the power of choice. 4. Silence as inner discipline. Be honest with yourself. The hardest part isn't starting to be silent, it's staying silent long enough. Because deep down, our instinct is always to speak, to explain, to close the chapter, to be acknowledged. And this is where the real test begins. Because the moment you break your silence, one text, one explanation, you hand the power back to them. But if you hold it, if you stay firm, that silence becomes inner discipline. And that discipline shapes you into a stronger version of yourself. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Silence is the training ground for that mastery. It teaches you that not every urge must be answered. Not every pain requires an explanation. Not every door deserves to be knocked on again. You might wonder, but if I stay silent, what do I do with that empty space? The answer: use silence as practice. Write. Fill a journal with the words you never said, the pain you've carried, the dreams you buried. Let the page speak for you. Move. Run until the sweat reminds you you're still alive. Lift until your muscles prove your strength is returning. Rebuild. Start small. A morning habit. A healthy meal. An hour learning something new. Little steps every day add up to transformation. I remember a friend. After walking away from a toxic relationship, she didn't make a speech. She didn't post online. She didn't announce her change. She just went silent. And in that silence, she rebuilt. Yoga, books, art. At first, no one noticed, but months later, when her ex looked back, all they saw was someone unrecognizable, brighter, calmer, stronger, and all they could do was watch in silence. See, silence isn't revenge. It isn't a weapon to hurt them. If you use it to punish, you'll burn out. But if you use it as discipline, you'll grow stronger every day. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of training. Every time you want to send that text, but don't you train your will. Every time you want to argue, but choose to smile, you train your strength. Every time you want to chase, but decide to stand still, you train your self-control. These invisible reps done over and over are rebuilding you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The strong man is the one who can keep calm in the middle of the storm." That's what silence is, calm in the storm. When you choose silence, you're not denying the pain. You're admitting it's there but refusing to let it control you. You're no longer ruled by impulse. You're in charge. And here's the beauty: when you stay consistent, silence transforms. At first, it feels like a weight on your chest, but slowly, it becomes space. Space to breathe. Space to rebuild. Space to rediscover yourself. So remember, this silence isn't a void. It's discipline. It's training for your mind and your heart. If you endure the hard part at the beginning, silence stops being a burden. It becomes natural. It becomes strength. Let silence be the ground where you grow, not to prove anything to them, but to prove to yourself that you chose peace over chaos, that you chose mastery over reaction, that you chose rebirth over being stuck in the past. 5. Silence as creation. Picture this: a barren field after a brutal winter, the ground cracked, dry, empty. The wind feels like it's carrying death. But underneath, life is waiting. Roots are repairing, seeds are sleeping, preparing to break through. That's what silence is. Not death, but preparation, the groundwork for a new season. You may have thought silence was a prison, a lonely cell that trapped you. But here's the truth: when you stop pouring your energy out, stop arguing, stop explaining, stop chasing, you keep that energy for yourself. And energy doesn't disappear. It flows inward. It builds. Think back to the days after heartbreak, after loss. At first, the silence of your room feels like a tomb, empty, suffocating. But then, in that emptiness, you start small. You clean a corner of your desk. You write a few lines in a journal. You take a morning walk. Day after day, the small things stack, and little by little, they become change. I once heard about a woman. After leaving a painful marriage, she sat alone in her silent house. At first, it terrified her. But instead of filling the silence with meaningless calls or empty words, she began with one small act: painting a wall. Then she organized her kitchen. Then she wrote down business ideas she had buried for years. 6 months later, from that same kitchen, she started a business. And it all began with silence. That's the miracle. Most people miss silence is not confinement. Silence is a workshop, a studio, a construction site where you quietly rebuild yourself, not with explanations, not with noise, but with consistent silent action. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Silence feels like a roadblock, but it is the road. It feels like emptiness, but it is fertile ground for creation. Why does silence have the power to create a new identity? Because before your identity was written by others, you were the one who always forgives, the one who always comes back, the one who always explains. But in silence, no one else holds the pen. You do. And day by day, you rewrite yourself. Ask yourself, if I didn't have to chase anyone, if I didn't have to prove anything, who would I be? That's the question silence gives you. And while you quietly clean, quietly learn, quietly build, you're answering it. Not with words, but with your life. Silence teaches you that creation doesn't need noise. A river carves stone without sound. A seed breaks the earth in silence. No announcement, no declaration. But one day, when others look back, they see a new version of you. And the shock. You never needed them to become that person. So don't see silence as an empty void. See it as a construction site alive with work. Every new habit is a brick. Every positive thought is a beam. Every day of discipline is another piece of the new house you're building for your life. Remember, this silence is not the end. It's the beginning of creation. It's the birthplace of a new identity, not one written by others, but one authored by you. And that is the greatest power. Silence gives the power to be the author of your own life. 6. Silence as transformation. Have you ever sat in front of a fire, watching it burn away the old, only to realize that same fire is also the birthplace of something new? That's silence. Silence is the fire. It burns the old. It forges the new. It doesn't destroy you. It remakes you. Here's the truth. The biggest transformations in life are never loud. A seed doesn't scream as it breaks open underground. A caterpillar doesn't announce when it becomes a butterfly. The greatest changes happen in silence, and so does yours. Your silence is the cocoon, the hidden season that prepares you to rise with new wings. I once knew a man. After a brutal heartbreak, he chose silence. No long texts, no public displays of pain. Instead, he signed up for a language class. He started writing music. He ran every morning. At first, friends thought he was just avoiding reality, but months later, they saw him on a small stage playing a song he had written himself. He smiled and said, "Silence taught me how to listen to myself." For him, silence wasn't darkness. It was rebirth. And that's the point. Silence stops being a reaction and starts becoming your identity. It's not about fighting back. It's not about proving you're strong for a season. It becomes who you are. Calm in how you walk. Strength in what you choose. A quiet declaration. I don't need to prove anything. My transformation proves itself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A man should stand upright, not be kept upright." That's what silence does. It forges you into someone who can stand tall, no longer shaken by the noise outside. Think about it. They expected you to collapse, to beg, to break, but instead, you became unrecognizable. They looked for the old version of you, desperate, fragile, clinging. And what they found was a new version, strong, free, untouchable. And that truth cut deeper than any words ever could. Remember, silence is not a pause. It's the furnace of the soul. It melts away impurities. It refines the purest part of you. It forces you to face yourself. And in that facing, you find someone new. Seneca once said, "No man becomes wise by chance, but through training and toil." Silence is that training. Hard, unseen, necessary. So the next time you feel abandoned, misunderstood, underestimated, don't see your silence as weakness. See it as a program, a hidden training ground. No applause, no spotlight, but shaping you into your strongest self. Look at the process. Silence burns away the old habits, dependence, pleading the hunger for approval. Silence forges new strength, self-control, creativity, resilience. Silence transforms you into someone the world won't even recognize when you emerge. That's the power of transformation. Not transformation for them. Transformation for you. Not to prove, to be free. So trust the process of silence, because when you step out of the cocoon, you won't be the one who was hurt. You'll be the one they can no longer bind. The one even those who broke you must admit you have become someone entirely new, stronger, freer, untouchable. 7. Silence as a shield. Picture this: a fortress on a hill, arrows flying, shouts echoing, winds pounding against the walls, and yet, inside, perfect peace. That fortress is you, and the walls protecting you aren't built from stone. They're built from silence. Silence is the shield. It guards your peace from outside provocation. It saves your energy from battles that aren't worth fighting. And most of all, It protects you from yourself, from the urge to prove, from the urge to argue, from the urge to react. Think about it. Every day arrows are fired at you. A sarcastic remark at work, a mocking comment online, a challenging glare in an argument. And what's our instinct? Fire back, defend ourselves, launch another arrow. But the more you fight, the more you bleed energy. You get pulled into wars that give you nothing in return. I remember a colleague who told me his story. Another guy at work mocked him constantly. At first, he fought back. Every jab turned into a debate. Every meeting became a silent duel between egos. And every night he went home exhausted, not from the job, but from battles that never mattered. Until one day he tried something new. He stayed silent. No reaction, no counterattack. And you know what happened? The insults lost their power because no one was catching them anymore. Weeks later, the other guy stopped completely. His shield wasn't words, it was silence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is the essence of silence. You can't control how people treat you, but you can always control how you respond. And when you choose silence, you keep your greatest power. The power to not let anyone control your mind. Ask yourself, how many times have you lost your peace over a meaningless remark? How many times have you won an argument, but walked away defeated inside? And how many times did you realize later that if you had just stayed silent, it wouldn't have mattered at all? This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. Silence doesn't mean you lost. It means you refused to waste yourself on a fight that never deserved you. Silence is a boundary. It's a declaration. My peace matters more than proving I'm right. Seneca once warned. Every time you react to an insult, you hand your peace to the offender. So ask yourself, if every arrow pierced your heart, would you even have the strength to continue your journey? But if you build the wall of silence, those arrows fall harmlessly to the ground. Remember, this silence is not weakness, it is defense. It is the shield that saves your precious energy for what truly matters: building, creating, loving, growing. So next time you face a provocation, an insult, a pointless argument, stop, breathe, choose silence. Because sometimes the strongest way to win is not by defeating them, but by refusing to let them touch your peace. 8. Silence as rebirth. Picture the darkest night. So dark you believe no light could ever break through. But then on the horizon, dawn begins to rise. That is silence at its highest form. Not an ending, a beginning, not a grave, a doorway, the place where a new you is born. Because when you choose silence long enough, the old self begins to fade. The self that chased, the self that begged, the self that lived for approval, gone. And in that empty space, a new self emerges, independent, dignified, unbound by anyone's validation. Remember, this silence does not erase you. Silence rebirths you. I recall a woman who lived years in a broken marriage. She screamed to be heard. She cried to be understood. She explained 1,000 times just to prove she was worthy. But nothing changed. Until one day, she chose silence. Not the silence of bitterness, but the silence of rebuilding. She walked every morning. She learned new skills. She cared for herself. Months later, the world didn't see a tired, wounded woman anymore. They saw someone radiant, independent, untouchable. That wasn't loss. That was rebirth. And do you know what makes rebirth unstoppable irreversibility? Once you learn how to live without needing validation, you never go back. You've walked through a door that closes forever. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Live in noise, and your soul is dyed by judgment, comparison, doubt. Live in silence, and your true colors finally return clear, strong, unmistakably yours." Ask yourself this: how many times have you lived just to be confirmed? How many times have you tied your worth to someone's approval? How many times have you collapsed because no one acknowledged your effort? Now imagine, living without needing any of it. How free would you be? Silence is the answer. It ends dependence, and it begins self-mastery. It declares, I no longer need to prove myself. I know my worth, and that is enough. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Silence is that ending. The end of obsession. The end of endless arguments and explanations. But it is also the beginning. The beginning of a life where you are fully yourself, no longer defined by others. Think of silence like new skin. The old peels away. The new is stronger, tougher, alive. Think of silence like a cocoon. When you step out, you are no longer a caterpillar. You are a butterfly free in the open sky. And here's the truth. The rebirth is internal. Others may notice your silence, but they'll never grasp the battles you fought inside it. Only you know how each day of silence laid a new foundation, built a new strength. Until one day when you finally step forward, the world won't even recognize you. Silence never makes you weaker. It only strips away what was never yours, the dependency, the insecurity, the fear of other people's opinions. And it gives you back what has always been yours, your strength, your freedom, your untouchable self. So if you're in silence right now, don't fear it. You're not ending. You're beginning. You're not disappearing. You're transforming. And that is the highest truth of silence. Rebirth. Pause for a moment. Look back at the journey we've just walked through. From the very first moments of silence, through the chaos it created in their mind, to the moment you realized the power was in your hands all along. It all leads to one simple, powerful truth. Silence is not weakness. People think silence is punishment, that you're quiet just to hurt someone. Wrong. Silence isn't about making them fall. It's about making you stand tall. People think silence is emptiness, that when words disappear, nothing remains. Wrong again. Silence is never empty. It's full of strength, full of transformation. So what is silence really? Silence is power. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop begging for approval, the balance shifts. They grow uneasy. You grow steady. They lose control. You take yours back. Silence is discipline, because staying quiet isn't easy. It forces you to resist your deepest urge to speak. It trains you to choose peace over conflict. And in that process, you build life's most important muscle, self-control. Silence is creation. The energy you once wasted on arguments flows inward. You turn the prison into a workshop. You journal. You train. You learn. You build a new foundation for your life. And slowly, silence becomes the soil where your true identity begins to grow. Silence is transformation. It's fire burning away the old, forging the new. It turns the chained self into the free self, like the seed underground, like the caterpillar in the cocoon. All great transformations happen in silence, until one day you step out, and the world says, "You're not the same person anymore." Silence is protection. It's the invisible fortress guarding your peace. It shields you not just from insults and noise, but from your own impulse to defend, to explain, to react. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. When you choose silence, you choose self-control. And above all, silence is rebirth." At its highest level, it's no longer a tactic. It's not a temporary choice. It's a new beginning. The moment you bury the old self and let a new one rise independent, dignified, untouchable. Once you learn to live without needing to explain, you never go back. So let me ask you, what will your silence become? Just an empty pause, or a brand new beginning? A small punishment, or a great rebirth? Seneca once said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Silence is that end, the end of dependency, of endless arguments, of living for approval. But silence is also the beginning of a life where your peace cannot be stolen and your growth cannot be stopped. So next time you feel the urge to justify, remember silence speaks louder than 1,000 explanations. Next time you feel the need to hold on, remember, silence frees you more than any embrace. Next time you think silence is the end, remember this: silence is the beginning of a life where you hold the pen and no one else gets to write your story. The final message is simple. Silence doesn't close the book. It opens a new chapter. A chapter where you are no longer the seeker, but the sovereign. A chapter where your peace cannot be stolen and your growth cannot be stopped. So keep that silence. Let it guard you. Let it rebirth you. And let it remind you you are stronger than you ever imagined, and you deserve a life lived in peace and freedom.